This is the Darren Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz.
Paltrocast.
I've been interviewing musicians, comedians, and all sorts of entertainers for almost 20 years. Joan Rivers, Flavor Flav, Paris Hilton, members of Guns N' Roses and the Eagles, and countless others. This show is about artists and why they do what they do.
Paltrocast.
Thank you for downloading the latest episode of the Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz. On this episode, I spoke with a bunch of different artists who all have sold millions of albums, but by doing very different things career-wise. All of them have been around for decades, and all of them are all doing really well. And that is Dave Ellefson from Megadeth, three-fourths of the band the Mavericks, and Tom Keifer. First up is my interview with Dave Ellefson. Yes, the bassist from Megadeth. This is a really good get for the Paltrocast. Dave isn't just resting on the laurels of being one of the co-founders of Megadeth. He has a record company, a coffee company, a film studio. He's written 2 books. He's done a lot of things, and he keeps doing a lot of things. And I had the pleasure of speaking with him by phone, largely about his collaboration with Thom Hazaert, who he co-wrote 2 of the books with and runs the record label with. He was as nice as humanly possible. There's a lot to learn from talking with Dave Ellefson, to say the least.
Thank you for your time, first and foremost. And there's so many things I want to ask you about. And the first thing is the book that you wrote with Tom. Did you know that you were going to be writing a sequel when you were writing the first one?
No, I didn't. In fact, I didn't even plan on writing the first one because I thought memoirs were something you wrote when you're like 70 or 80 years old, sitting on your porch, before the sun finally sets on your life. And that's when you write your memoir. So to do it at that time when I was still in my 40s seemed out of character a bit, except that, I guess maybe all my friends were doing it. And Joel MacGyver, who's been a dear friend and really understood my life and my career path, especially I had just come back to Megadeth, and there was all these big things happening in 2010 when we started writing the book. He really urged me to get moving on, and I'm glad he did, because I've often thought about writing a memoir, and Joel largely showed me the ropes to guide me with it. So, here we are, 8-9 years later, and I'm writing another one. And a lot had happened in the, I guess since 2012, I guess, till, current day. And so Tom actually urged to write this one. He just said, hey, let's write a book. And, again, I sometimes can't see the bigger picture of my life, which is why I have friends and people around me who can. And one of the things he said, I said to him, I said, look, a lot of this is already on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, everybody knows we have a coffee company and a record label. Like, what's new here? What is the news, And I think for me, some life lessons, like a couple things in my book. I talk about just say yes when an opportunity knocks. And I think the other story that I didn't expect to unfold, but it unfolded as I was writing the book, was the story of how Combat Records, and telling that whole journey, because it's my alma mater. It was my very first record label I was signed to with Megadeth, and it's now my most recent record label I'm signed to with my own solo album, Sleeping Giants. But it's interesting how that took me back to the beginning and the origins of Megadeth, and I got to tell that story, which is largely an untold story in the Megadeth history.
Right, and in a way it can be hard to track you, because we know of Dave the musician in Megadeth, we know of Dave who does the soul albums and, F5 and all that kind of stuff. Then there's the record company, the coffee company, the books, and then I believe there's a film company. And I don't know if everybody realizes that there's this one guy doing all that stuff. I'm wondering when that entrepreneurial urge kicked in, when you realized that there was more to life than music and being a musician.
I think I've always had it. And I think meeting, look, I think I've always had it. Even back in the early 90s when I was dealing with my endorsements, managers never did that stuff, because managers don't make commissions on that stuff. At least they didn't then. Now they actually pay us to use instruments. Back then they weren't paying us. They were just, kind of working out some additional advertising. And providing gear for the road. And, managers don't like to touch what they don't get paid on, so, I was always kind of a do-it-yourself guy. When I was a kid in Minnesota, I was the guy, putting the bios and the promo packs together and shopping to the booking agents. And I'm the one who always had the rapport with the booking agents. And as we started Megadeth, I was right there next to Dave on every conversation and every step we made. I was always encouraged by my father to know what is going on with your business. Don't blindly leave your business in someone else's hand. That's how you always hear about these guys, And not just little guys, but big guys. Billy Joel. I mean, that story of what happened in his career with, getting ripped off. And, it's happened to all of us. I mean, look, until you get ripped off a time or two, you're really not in the music business, I guess. The Kiss guys talk openly about it. They made all this money in the 70s, and one day they said, hey, where's all my money? And realized they didn't have any, and that'll wake you up real friggin' quick, So I think I've always had this entrepreneurial business side to me. And as I look, when Megadeth disbanded in 2002, that was very much a rubber meets the road moment in my life, where it's like, okay, band's done. Now it's time to move on to other things. And I was ready to hang the bass up and no longer be a bass player ever again if it required me having to provide for my family. And what I found through that is, the good Lord or the universe or whoever you want to call that, gave, in my case, the gift of music and playing the bass. That's a gift I've been given from birth. And, that's a gift that will always be with me. And so to some capacity, I'll always be a bass player. But I've really enjoyed in recent years, certainly being more than just a bass player.
Right. And with your record company, I think you're just about the only person on the planet that could have worked with Bumblefoot and Mark Slaughter and Chuck Mosley. And I think that goes back to that just say yes attitude. For you, is it just good music is good music?
I got to hand a lot of that to Thom Hazaert. I mean, he really has been a real partnership to me. And I say that because we don't always agree on everything. And that's what real partnership is. Real partnership is that, even Dave Mustaine and I had a saying over the years, if we both agree to the same thing, then one of us is unnecessary. You don't need a second guy to disagree with you. There has to be a push and pull, because that's what creates it forces you into a place of thinking bigger and thinking beyond what you would normally do on your own. And that really, to me, is a true definition of partnership. So Thom and I are that guy. I mean, I've certainly, challenged him and raised him to new standards in how we run our business. And just because of my experience that I've gone to the winner's circle of the Grammys, I have been to the top of the heap. And you can't run a business like that unless you have had those successes. And I've been very blessed to have those fall my way. At the same time, creatively, Thom has really been, he challenges me constantly with things, and as a result has been a tremendous partner. And I mean, look at all the things we've done between the label, the coffee company, the book, even now writing songs and putting records out together, So, he and I are very much a part of each other's story at this juncture in our life.
I would compare your collaboration with Thom to what Joan Jett has with Kenny Laguna, and there's really only a handful of people who are able to work with somebody who's a co-writer and a manager. Did you have anyone initially trying to tell you, hey, don't work with the guy on the creative front that's also handling the business?
I've had a couple people, look, we all have a history, you know what I mean? And I'm sure, I'd like to keep my reputation as squeaky clean as I can, because you're only as good as your last gig, and your last gig will always walk you into your next gig, so it's important that, our reputations precede us, but, Thom Thom grew up in a very different record business than I did. I moved to LA in 1983. I don't think he got to LA until 95, 96. So he had a very different experience in Hollywood and with the labels than I did. His experience was with Fred Durst and Korn and kind of the new metal movement that was taking shape at that time. Mine was, I got there and it was Megadeth, Poison, Motley Crue had just taken off. By the time I got to Capitol Records with P. Cells, Bob Seger, had just put out Like a Rock. Tina Turner was at the top of MTV, you know what I mean? So my experience, I got to experience a very different, record business than Thom did. And so with that said, Thom has been really good about, reframing my, reference of what sells today. So because obviously record companies were in the business of selling records, and selling downloads in this case. At the same time, also being really in tune with legacy artists like Doyle and Mark Slaughter and, Bumblefoot's kind of a legacy artist because he's had some legacy gigs with Asia and Guns N' Roses and whatnot, but he's also very much a new artist. So, Thom is really good at understanding the A&R side of the business, and that's a role that I've never been a part of. I'm a fan of music and I'm a fan of bands and I hear things I like. Doesn't necessarily mean that it belongs in our wheelhouse at the record company just because I like it.
And most people, I would argue, who are at your level in terms of commercial success, still playing arenas when you do go on tour with Megadeth, most people would go, I tour, and then I'm off tour and I kick back until there's an album to make. But obviously with all those companies going on, you're on email all day. So what kind of productivity system you have in place? Are you big on to-do lists and calendars, or are you just more so able to delegate?
I think a big part of it is because I'm sober, and I'm not on drugs and alcohol, and I don't sort of wind down at 5 o'clock and head to the bar for beer and tacos and then have to shake off a hangover the next day. You know what I mean? So that right there clears up a lot of hours of my week, because I'm able to be very focused, and at my age, 54, soon to be 55 in November, I'm really hitting I think at a very kind of mature level of business acumen. And haven't gone to college. I'm really glad I did my college, got my degree back in 2007 because, as I sit here in a parking lot and I see Safeway or GMC or, UPS or whatever, I understand how those businesses work. At the time I was working for Peavey, which is a very big international musical instrument manufacturer. We did a lot of international manufacturing. It was right at the time when everything was moving from the USA over to China. So I really got to be at the heart center of what has become a national transition of business here in America, from things being made here in the USA to made in China. And I got to really be right on them and doing it inside an industry I enjoyed, which is the music business. What's the difference between a guitar made in America and a guitar made in China? I got to hold them both in my hand and really see the products and price points and understand from the sales and marketing team and the engineering and stuff. So, I think those experiences I had, over a decade ago, they've really played into everything that I do now in my businesses away from the stage, to really help understand all of that, But, and I guess probably look more specifically to your question, this week has been music week. I'm ramping up for the Mega Cruise next week. So it's been about just kind of getting my head back into those songs that I'm going to be doing on the boat. I'm obviously preparing for a big event with KK Downing over in the UK. So I'm well entrenched in Judas Priest world, which has been a ton of fun. And then at the same time, I have a big Latin America bass story tour coming up. So I'm, being just kind of mentally preparing for what that's going to be day to day. Because every day I fly, putting a new band together and hitting the stage, and fortunately I had that experience previously, not only doing bass story, but back in the 2000s when I worked for the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, I learned how to put a band together in a couple hours and take it on stage and rock the house, So I think my life today is an accumulation of all of the different experiences that I've had.
Wow. Well, 2 more questions and then you're a free man. And the first one is, I've read that you live in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And as somebody who's toured the world many places over, assuming that you're still in Green Bay, what is it that made you move there of all places?
Well, actually, Thom Hazaert lives in Green Bay. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been out here for about 26 years. I moved. My transition is I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, Jackson, Minnesota. So that's, I think, a kindred spirit that Thom and I both share, is we're both small-town Midwest kids, you know, who had a hankering for rock and roll. We both moved to Hollywood, obviously at different decades. Tom's about 10 years younger than me. But we share a similar path and a similar passion, you know? So yeah, he lives in Green Bay. I actually did a bass story in Green Bay, and I got to tell you, what an awesome town. I'm a Vikings fan, so, you know, by nature, I'm probably supposed to be a little opposed to Green Bay. Right. I went and I saw Lambeau Field, and I love Green Bay. I thought it was awesome. We did a book signing at Barnes & Noble and had a great show, and, you know, small little, you know, it's funny, you can get anywhere in 10 minutes in Green Bay, whereas in Phoenix, it takes you 20 minutes, and if you live in LA, it's about an hour.
Right, absolutely. So in closing, Dave, any last words for the kids?
You know, just thank you to everybody who supported me over all the years, all the music, of course. You know, I love the saying. I don't know if it was Picasso or who came up with it, but, you know, it's not something to the effect that, you know, it's not that I'm supposed to live forever, but trying to create art, music, business, legacy that does live forever, you know. And I think through all these things that I'm doing, you know, I try to do them with a heart center to help other people and lift them up and make them be the focus rather than me. And I think maybe that's a fundamental role as a bass player. You know, I think usually as a bass player, we're the guy who is often a little to the side, but we're supportive of the other people in the band, because as the band survives and as the band thrives, so do I.
Next up is my early November chat with 3/4 of the band, the Mavericks, who've been at it for 30 years, hence this 30th anniversary tour that they've got going on around the world. The latest album from the band is Sing the Hits. It's a covers album, but all the songs are done in a style that you would kind of expect from the Mavericks. That band has never played by the rules. They've always spanned different genres, showed different influences. And we spoke about that during our chat. We spoke about future plans, all sorts of things. And this talk was with Eddie Perez, Paul Deacon, and Jerry Dale McFadden. Raul missed the chat, but we spoke about everything afterwards in person. Raul, fun fact, is a David Lee Roth fan. So when I allude to the fact that David Lee Roth had a Spanish album called Sonrisa Salvaje, which I recommend everyone to listen to, that was discussed after the microphone was turned off. I think you're going to enjoy this chat with 3/4 of the Mavericks, and hopefully you'll be able to see them pretty soon on that 30th anniversary world tour. So the new record is a covers record. Was it known from the get-go that this was going to be a covers record, not original album?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That was the whole premise of us doing it. And, you know, after 30 years of never having done one, if we're not going to do it, you know, now's the time. Otherwise, when will we do it?
Sure.
It kind of went hand in hand with celebrating our 30th anniversary of the band. Like, let's pull out some songs that influenced us or inspired us to play music and inspire us even today. So it kind of went hand in hand with the 30th anniversary celebration. So
When you're picking songs for a covers album or songs to cover in general, there's sometimes that fear of, well, some band's done it before. Like, you have Don't Be Cruel on the record, which Cheap Trick made into a hit in a totally different way. Did you guys have any fear, like, oh, well, it's been done before? Or do the Mavericks just keep doing their own thing the way they always have?
I would say the latter. You know, I think that well, a couple things. One, this is a band of audiophiles, and
right.
I figured it out, and we listen to way more music than we actually play on show day. On show day as well. You know, we're up there for 2.5 to 3 hours.
Sure.
Whatever we are. It's a significant amount of time, but there's hours before we go on, and usually hours after, that we are listening to music and celebrating music and doing that. So it's, as I said, a band of audiophiles, and that's where our inspiration is from. So there's always, you know, it comes up all the time, man, we should cover this, we should do this.
Sure.
And sometimes we'll do it in sound check, and sometimes it makes it way into the set, as some of these on the record. And then some of them we've just always talked about. There's an idea, and hey, let's pull this one out and do that. So, yeah.
Now, go ahead, Eddie.
Just to add to that real quick, a final note, is that above all, though, the songs of whatever it is that he's chosen usually has to resonate with some emotional consistency for Raul. You know, he's going to be putting forth that energy.
Right.
So that's kind of all of that in a nutshell, I guess. Is a lot of the times it's like, you know, he'll spearhead something, and then the band just kind of falls right into place somehow, you know. So it's just kind of like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
As far as somebody else having done, I mean, the other thing, other than being audiophiles, is we're basically selfish. And so it's kind of worked for us, and we please ourselves musically. It's gonna, when we record, and that carries over to the live show, which is where we, have a good time. So that seems to be working, this self-gratification. It seems to be, moving into the audience, and it's where we do what we do best.
Right. Well, I'm going to come back to that in a second, but the first thing I said when I met Eddie was, I know that he had his Kiss Ace Frehley passed to him. Was there almost like a hard rock song along the lines of a Kiss or Van Halen that almost made the cut for this record?
Well, not on the hard rock, not on... we covered a Motley Crue song on a Motley Crue tribute, but very much a different version.
Right.
I can't remember anyone coming up as a possibility.
Well, there again, too, though, Raul, he these songs really have to have some emotional resonance with him first. He's putting that energy forward. He's singing the songs. He's out in front of everybody. And his tastes tend to come more in certain genres and certain styles in certain decades.
Right.
I guess the real hard rock stuff would probably be more my taste from where I come from, which is 70s, 60s, and 70s rock and roll, and that's kind of all together. We bring something different and individual at the same time, all together, and some of the songs get a little ruckus going on, but in general, I think that Raul, he always picks great songs. Let's just face it.
Of course.
And anything he sings is going to be pretty fantastic, And I think the luxury of this moment for us with a record like this is that in the way in which we, pursue our business, which is very self-contained, we are able to just operate in a way where Paul was, articulating that we, mostly selfishly just kind of set our ship, to a certain course, and we just kind of fall in line, and it seems to usually work out all right for us, But
sometimes it's planned out, and sometimes it's not at all.
Yeah, but I think
it just happens.
But I think more importantly, what's in the record is just a lot of good energy. We spent a lot of years together making music and traveling a lot of miles, and I think that after all this time, we still have a really great energy, and I think that it comes through in that music.
Definitely agreed. And when the Mavericks first came on the market, you were kind of like the music critics' enemy in a way, where they couldn't control you, you weren't following any of the rules, almost like the Replacements were to that sort of indie rock genre. And then you guys transcended genres over and over and over again, became your own thing. I'm curious when the media finally turned around and started being okay and fair.
Well, I mean, especially in today's world, it's okay to be transgenre.
Oh, sure. I see what he did there, but what he's saying is...
we have our own path now. And again, that probably goes back a little bit to the pleasing yourself and not putting those restrictions, and it gets we're more and more able to do that. However, I mean, I only remember, I think even we've been fortunate in the labels that we've been with, really even back to MCA. I mean, very little restrictions were ever put on us musically. I mean, to the point they gave us free reign to To the extent where when we did Trampoline and put horns and really started cross-pollinating genres, it didn't work in the country field. And at that time in the 90s, you were really stuck in whatever bin you were in, whether it was country rock, R&B, or jazz or whatever. It wasn't, even though in some ways music has gotten, playlists have gotten smaller with radio and everything else, but music is allowed to flow from one genre to another. It's not quite as specific. But luckily that record did well in the UK as a pop record. So that kind of changed things for us as well.
So tying it all with the 30th anniversary, a lot of bands, when they hit that 30th anniversary, they're old. You guys don't come across as old, out of ideas, anything like that. So it's feasible that you're going to get to 40, 50, 60, that kind of thing.
Most likely, yes.
Hopefully, yes. So are there any things you haven't yet accomplished that you're still hoping to?
Absolutely. We've even got stuff that's brewing now that nobody knows about. Like, for instance, we've just completed a record of all songs sung in Spanish, which will come out probably third quarter of next year, and it'll throw some folks, be surprising to some people that we do something so bold as that. But
right.
Though we're excited about maybe that music reaching a broader audience, maybe looking forward to going to South America and Mexico and taking the band down there and
going into new markets.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah,
So
that's the biggest thing I think that we're all excited about. There's bigger outer lying opportunities that we're pursuing at the moment too. And so I think the band's at a certain point now, since we got back together this phase of the band. We're now in a different area in terms of what we're trying to accomplish the next 4 or 5 years, whatever that is, work backwards from there. But I would say that, like Jerry Neal said, the Spanish record that we're getting ready to put out there is something that because our business, the core of our business is the live business. So of course we're trying to see where haven't we been yet? Where haven't we? I'd love to get a chance to go out to Japan and take the band. We've never done that. So there's so many other things still left to do, and in some respect, for me, sometimes it feels like there's not enough time to do all of it,
Right.
It's actually nice with finishing up this tour. Next weekend is our last week, and then we're taking some time off. We call it our off season to get fixed up. Raul has to have some work done on his ankle. I have to get carpal tunnel surgery, so we'll take some months off. But I'm excited about the time that we'll be able to plan. We've already started. Part of this trip was us to recap what we've done this year and into next year and beyond. And there's a lot of things business-wise that we're conquering. We've had our own label now for 3 years, and so we're just, I think, early this next year, we will have our first record out that's not us on our label.
Okay.
That's very exciting. The Sweet Lizzie Project, which is a band from Cuba that we've brought here, which is pretty amazing band. And so expanding that and continuing to look for music for that. We talk about business things like creating a festival. The name of the label, I don't know if you remember, is Modern Windows.
Yes.
Means one world, and so rather than the Mavericks Festival, at some point we'd love to have the concept. We've always talked about the concept of the Modern Window Festival. We do cruise ships, so possibly we'll have our own Modern Window cruise.
There were Sixth Man or something like that.
Yeah,
That's possible.
partner up
Sure.
with them or someone. There's a couple of them out there.
Right.
Those business aspects are other things that we look to expand things and allow us the musical freedom that we want to believe that us having makes it desirable for people to come.
So this is not that 30th anniversary of we're going to play our best album and then disappear and come back for the 35th and the 40th. This is the cottage industry done well. So speaking of the Spanish album, have you ever heard the David Lee Roth Spanish album?
No. What? How is that possible?
I'll tell you more about that one off.
You're really a 70s, 80s rocker, right?
Blowing my
I
mind.
could tell.
Blowing my mind.
Someone's got to be, but also into the
Yeah.
Mavericks.
Yeah.
So, in closing, any last words for the kids?
Do your homework.
I'll just say, I hope my son is asleep right now. It's way past his bedtime. Good night, Neo.
Well, I guess if I had anything to say to all the kids out there that might be listening, hopefully they are, but if you're going to find yourself in a situation where you think you want to pursue, career in this business, not only do you have to be tenacious, but you have to be patient, and you have to really be genuine with what it is you're trying to put forth. This band has never tried to do one thing or the other. It's always just allowed the creative energy just to happen. But in doing so, it's been the most fulfilling musical experience I've ever had in my life. And we all have been doing this a very long time.
All done stuff.
Collectively and separately,
Yes.
know? But the way in which we operate, it comes down to that. We're very genuine about what we do, and I think that's how you can sustain that energy for 35, 36, 80, whatever it is, But I think that we have somehow found a way to do that through the music and through all of us, being great friends. So I guess that's my advice, just make sure what you're doing, just you have to really love it, because it's an awful lot of work that it takes to put it out there, an awful lot,
Anything to add, Paul?
No, I mean, I can't follow that. Eddie Perez put it perfectly.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, tenacity.
Never give up.
But it
I
has
see
to be
what you did
genuine.
there.
It has to be genuine too.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
has to be real.
Just come from the heart. If you
I
don't-
mean, for me, it's like no matter what song we play as a band up there on stage, I feel like they're all great ones, and I put every bit of my emotional energy into it in the best way I possibly can.
Sure.
And when you consider that we do that on a consistent basis, 100+ times a year, every year, non-stop, that's a testament to the music and how it resonates with us. It has to be real. It has to be genuine. I mean, it has to be something you believe in.
I would add, even, and it's the same thing said a different way. I mean, you can put it to really anything. And it's a work ethic. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. So do it to the best of your ability and enjoy it in the moment while you're doing it. And don't expect there to be a reward. Fame is not a reward. Success, the reward, honestly, the one that you should be cognizant of is the fact that you have this ability to create music and are creative in that way and have that outlet. That's your gift right there. Everything else is gravy, so enjoy that.
Last and definitely not least is my talk with Thom Keifer. I spoke with Thom a couple of months ago by phone. Thom may be best known as the singer and primary songwriter of the band Cinderella, but he's been very active as a solo artist. He's definitely not looking to the past, definitely pushing things forward. The latest album by the Thom Keifer Band is Rise. It definitely shows off his voice, and people have always loved that about Thom, that he's able to hit all these high notes and have this real blues rock kind of scream to his vocals. And not everyone realizes that he's lost his voice a few times over the years. So I asked Thom about his vocal journey, which is actually very serious, and hopefully it shows you the hard work that he puts into his career to stay where he is and to keep pushing forward. We also spoke about his family life, which is pretty interesting as well, so hope you enjoy the chat.
Hey, Darren, it's Thom Keifer.
Right on time. How's it going there, Thom?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing excellent, longtime fan. And of course, I wanted to ask you about the new record. But before I get to that, the podcast episode that you did with, I believe it was Ralph Sutton, was very interesting in that you opened up about your journey through vocal paralysis and back into getting your voice back. And one thing I didn't hear on that is, what is it that you do these days to keep your voice sounding great and healthy?
There's a lot of facets to that, one of which is whether you have a paresis or not. Singing is, your overall health is important. So before I even had that condition, I've been very health conscious in terms of diet, and hydrating on tour is very important, and proper rest. So that's still part of the regimen. But the thing that really keeps the paresis in check and actually got me out of that hole, which the hole was you're never going to sing again, is I learned opera technique. I started working with Ron Anderson, who teaches the opera technique, and I'd worked with a gazillion vocal coaches before that, which I learned bits and pieces from, but Ron's, the technique I learned from him just really kind of saved my voice, is what I say. He really kind of, taught me how to support and make the most of what I had left, I guess, if that makes sense. So long story short, that technique is something that I do every day. It's like an exercise regimen, if you will, for the vocal cords and the core of your body, where the breathing comes from and the support. And it's a pretty specific set of coordinations that, move the air the right way in the vocal cords. And, it's complicated. It's taken me years to really kind of understand it. I started working with him in 2009. And since then, my voice has been getting better and better and better every day from the first lesson with him. So, and that's something I do, like an hour of his warm-ups before every show. And then there's a 5-10 minute cool down after the show. That's very important because it kind of stretches the vocal cords back out and kind of calms them down.
It's interesting to me that that's not the first major thing you've overcome. And I say that because you talked about in past interviews, people say you're not going to sing again, let alone the way that you did. And that's not your first major victory. I would say earning a living as a musician when you were a teenager is, of course, a big deal. Getting a big record deal like you did, having those hits over the years, that's another journey. And also surviving grunge and the rock overhaul of the early 90s, that's another obstacle. So it looks like the life of Thom Keifer has been obstacle after obstacle. And I'm wondering how much of that is planning versus just, luck.
I call it life. And I don't think my story is unique. I think everyone who walks this planet wakes up every day and they're faced with challenges. Someone could wake up and lose their job tomorrow, or to find out that they have some horrible illness. It happens to everybody. Mine have been publicized, so so maybe it seems more intense, but I don't think I'm going through anything different than anyone else is in life. I know there's people all around me that I know who just are facing challenges every day. So, it's interesting. When the new single, The Death of Me, when we created the video, we came up with that idea of putting, by way of example, some of the things that I've been through. A lot of the things you mentioned aren't even in there, but they were certain. There's only so much time we had in that intro, but the voice stuff and the legal battles that I've had with the industry a couple of times over records that have gotten in the way, and some other medical issues and hospitalizations from heat exhaustion and just stuff that really recently have been challenges for me. And, then I smash them with a guitar. And the thought there was, to inspire people to visualize their own challenges and to destroy them, in their mind. The power of visualization is very, very powerful thing to do. And I got to tell you, when I took the guitar to that TV, it really, really felt good. So I encourage anyone watching that video to, like I said, my story on that TV screen is just one example. It's just mine, but everyone out there has those things, and put the face of your challenges and problems on that TV and imagine destroying them. And
Rise is the new album. And just like The Way Life Goes, the album before that, you wrote it with your wife, Savannah. What was the first song or experience that you had writing together? Did you know all along when you were dating before you got married that you would be writing music together?
It's just something that happened naturally. I've known Savannah for years and years and years, and she's an amazing songwriter. She was actually in Nashville prior to me moving here and was a staff writer at Sony and also had an artist deal that they were developing her for a record, and that deal kind of went south. So she and I can relate to the lawsuit and the legal things. So we bond on that. It's tough business out there. But no, she's an incredible writer. And, before we even made The Way Life Goes, she and I wrote stuff together, some stuff for some of her artist stuff that I just mentioned, and with other artists in town. We had a song on Andy Grigg's record, Freedom, called 100 Miles of Bad Road that we wrote with him. So, we've been working together for a long time. And The Way Life Goes was a situation where I was on the heels of a lawsuit situation that prevented, really shelved permanently a record for Cinderella that was with a major label, and kind of prevented us from recording to a certain extent for a number of years. So in that time period, Savannah and I really started working together because she was kind of on the heels of the same thing with her deal. And we really went out and started writing and recording songs that we loved just purely for the love of music, because there was no label involved. There wasn't, and there was no one telling us what, you have to be done by this day and we're going to release it and all that. So we worked with session players to create The Way Life Goes, and weren't really even thinking of it as a record till maybe about halfway through. We worked on it like for 9 years off and on. And at one point kind of looked at each other and thought, man, this could be a record. So we got a record deal for it pretty quickly when we started, running it up the flagpole. And next thing we know, it was like the record label was saying, we're releasing it, and you need to go tour. And I was like, whew, we need a band. So that's what brings us to where we are now. The band was formed, and day one had a great energy, and we've been touring for 6 years out there, and last year decided it was time to make a record. And so in answer to your original question, I've been working with Savannah for years, even before The Way Life Goes. So, it's a good partnership in terms of the music and the writing, because we really kind of approach it from very similar places. So it's very, very easy fit in terms of writing and creating together.
And is the long-term plan to be out there as Thom Keifer doing Thom Keifer records for the rest of your life?
This has really become a band. The new record was recorded exclusively with this band. There's not an outside musician on it. We cut it, for the most part, live, because we've been touring so much. So, before we even made this record, what kind of led to it being a band was the initial chemistry that we felt in the room the first night when we rehearsed. And then we went out and started doing dates, and the fans kind of recognized that energy. And I was happy about that, because I didn't really want to be a solo artist. All my heroes and musicians that I looked up to were part of bands like the Rolling Stones and Zeppelin and Bad Company and Skinner, and everyone was just kind of part of the gang. And that's what I've always aspired to be, is to be part of a band. So it was refreshing to me when we first went out and started touring that the fans recognized that there was a band chemistry. And they were talking as much about the band and the energy of the show and the whole thing as as much, if not more, than me. And that, I like that. And then they eventually, the fans, the hashtag Keifer band came from the fans online, on Twitter and on Facebook. They started, they would post things or comments, and they would put that hashtag, and it kind of stuck with us. But to me, it feels more like a band. So when you say to continue with making Thom Keifer records, to me now they're Keifer band records. I'm just the ringleader, I guess, is how I feel about it now. But yeah, that's the plan moving forward. We love touring together. The band's really become a family, and we want to obviously just release the record, so we're not really thinking about another record at this point, but I'm sure at some point there will be one. But right now we're just enjoying the release of this one and out touring, and we'll see where the life's journey leads us next.
And something I've noticed is that most of the musicians that you toured with in the 80s and 90s seem to have moved to Nashville, to the point that it looks like the whole LA metal scene and hard rock scene moved to Nashville. Do you see a lot of people there from, the olden days?
Well, I know there's a lot here, and on occasion, yes. But I'll be honest with you, we're so busy between making records, touring, and then, we have a teenage son who plays sports. And I mean, we're not really out hanging out much like in clubs or stuff, but, occasionally run into people. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of musicians who have moved here from the rock scene. And I moved here in 97. The town's changed quite a bit since then. I think more and more people, particularly recently, are really gravitating here. So it's a great place to create. I moved here like in the mid to later 90s with the whole music scene changing at that time. Cinderella had kind of fallen apart because we lost our deal and just were going our separate ways at that time. And that's when I first started thinking about maybe doing some stuff on my own. So started writing with some people here and really liked the vibe here. Amazing writers everywhere you go, amazing musicians, studios. So it was a nice shot in the arm to come into a town that just had so much creative energy.
Well, you mentioned your son is busy with sports a lot. People usually either gravitate towards what their father does for a living or get as far away as possible. Does he have any musical influences or musical impulses, you think?
When he was very young, he's actually very musical. He sings really well. When he was, could barely walk. He could sit behind this little set of drums that we had for him and keep beats. He used to play to like Aerosmith records, and we actually have memories of him playing the backbeat to Back in the Saddle and actually screaming at the top of his lungs on back, like with that same kind of tone. So he's always been very talented in that way. Early in his earlier school years, he took sax and played saxophone. He played piano, but he's always been into sports too. And as he got older, he just gravitated more that way, even though he has a ton of musical ability. He's just sports is his thing, and he kind of knew that from an early age, and it's just been his passion.
And has living in Nashville for the past 20 or so years turned you into a volunteer?
Referring to the football team?
To the football team. I didn't know if all those years outside of Philadelphia and South Jersey, if you went away from the Phillies and became a volunteer.
No, not so much, no.
Got it. So in closing, Thom, any last words for the kids?
Just looking forward to getting out and playing some more rock and roll for everybody. We've got some more dates coming up, and that's it. New record out, and check it out if you haven't already. Rise.
Thanks for listening to the Paltrocast with Darren Paltrowitz on the Pure Grain Audio Network. More information on the Paltrocast can be found online at www.puregrainaudio.com. Until next time, have a great Shabbos.